Hello everyone, Martin here, back with a video, a legacy video, I suppose. This is going to be the first in what's probably going to be two or three tutorial videos. So the aim of this is to give a little bit of a foundation upon which to um, learn how to play Legacy Doomsday combo. Um, this is obviously a here and now version of the deck. If you're watching this several years from now, who knows where the format is. So, in this video, I'll be going over the structure of the deck, the different components, what colors we're playing. In later videos, I'll be going over some strengths and weaknesses and possibly also some matchup sort of evaluations. So this is not for the Doomsday veteran, this video, although I'm happy to have you watch along. This is more for people wanting to or curious about dipping their toes in the archetype. And just a quick disclaimer, this is just my take on this. I have partaken in the wonderful Doomsday community, and obviously I'm standing on the shoulders of shoulders of giants, so to speak. But you are getting just one person's view on this deck, so you're going to get all of my biases with it. So probably seek cooperating sort of analyses elsewhere. Okay, so part one. What is the core tenets of Doomsday in Legacy? Well, Doomsday is at its heart, it's a Dimir spell-based combo deck. Colloquially, I have heard people describe it as a mono blue combo deck that wants to resolve a BBB spell. Which is to say that a lot of what this deck wants to do is to cast cantrips and use blue disruption based spells, but we also want to cast Doomsday. So we're Dimir because we want to cast Doomsday. Doomsday is black, and we want to win after Doomsday resolves by casting Thassa's Oracle, and Thassa's Oracle is blue. Now, does that mean that we can't play any more colors? No, of course not. Each of the three additional colors have been played at various times. As of recording, November 2023, there is a lot of Orcish Bowmasters in the format. There's a lot of black in the format. So I would say that for currently the most popular third color is green, because green gives you access to Veil of Summer and Carpet of Flowers, and especially Veil of Summer is quite appealing when you are trying to approach a Orcish Bowmasters slash Grief slash Thoughtseize metagame. Um, Typically, the splash colors will be mostly sideboard cards. You can play main deck Veil of Summer, but or if you're splashing white, you can play main deck Orim's Chant or Silence or Teferi. But a lot of the time, the splash color will manifest itself mostly in the sideboard. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the five in parentheses six components of the deck, and I have tried to show them here on screen. So the first column here is the cantrips. The second column is the combo pieces, or business spells, if you will. The third column is disruption slash protection. Fourth is utility cards. I've included the Thassa's Oracle here. You could argue that it may even it should be its own column as the win condition, but I've added it here. The fifth one is mana, uh, in the shape of Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, and Cabal Ritual. And then the parentheses one was the actual lands. Um, uh, I probably am not going to talk a whole lot about lands, but I'll touch upon them. Okay, so with regards to the card choices here, you want Brainstorm for sure, and you want Ponder, I would say. I think these 8 cards are somewhat set in stone. Obviously, you know, who knows where deck builders will look in the future. Maybe if some artifact sort of theme arrives, you might want to play Mishra's Bauble. Who knows if Ponder is set in stone. Brainstorm, I would say, is completely set in stone because it forms the basis of the many of the same turn winning lines, where you resolve Doomsday and win on the same turn. You often will involve Brainstorm, and Brainstorm is quite unique as a cantrip. And then we move on to the. Well, no, I'm just gonna briefly also mention here that I have added 2 Preordain to this list. This is just like a generic Demure list, so don't like hang yourself too much in the details about like card choices here. This is just to illustrate the different card choices. So Preordain is a very good cantrip as well. It's very powerful. And as you will notice, we only have Doomsday. We have to like, barring weirdo, very rare lines where you win by attacking with Street Wraith or some such. You have to cast and resolve Doomsday to win. So that means you have to find Doomsday, and there's a number of ways you can do this. I'm pretty happy with 2 tutor slots, and I've said this before, and I'll sort of stand by it. Although I've never tested it, so it is on a theoretical level. But if there were like a functional reprint of Doomsday that just had a different name, so like another black sorcery that did exactly the same for the same mana, I don't think I would want to play 8 copies. A lot of the time, if you have Doomsday in your hand, you don't want to draw a second copy of Doomsday. Having said that, though, like what I just said was that in order to win, we have to put Doomsday on the stack. In order to do that, we have to find Doomsday. So having more than 4 copies would be great. I think 6 is probably where I would be happy to be. I know a lot of people prefer more copies of Personal Tutor, which is the card I want to talk about now, which is it is a sort of pseudo Doomsday because it finds Doomsday. It's a tutor. It's not a very good tutors. Unfortunately, we don't get very good tutors in Legacy. You would have to play Vintage if you want the really powerful tutors like Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and Mystical Tutor. But Personal Tutor is a pretty it's a pretty nice fit in this deck. There is a lot of lines of turn 1 Personal Tutor, turn 2 cast Doomsday, and that's sort of why this card is here. Other tutor effects you could run would be like Dark Petition. That's also a pretty cool and Doomsday synergistic card. That I'm just gonna pull it up here for those not that familiar. Dark Petition. So this is sort of a demonic tutor. If you can pay 5 mana up front, it'll give you back 3 mana if you have spell mastery, and that 3 mana is, coincidentally what it is required to cast Doomsday. Other tutors could be mentioned: Grim Tutor, Wishclaw Talisman. I don't think either of them really have gotten to see much play. There is also a word to be said about building a Grixis version with Burning Wish. I have not really dabbled much with that. This probably would require us to put a copy of Doomsday in the sideboard, and I don't think like that's necessarily where I want to be, but you could certainly build a deck and it can certainly play well with like Burning Wish and then a copy of Doomsday in the sideboard. Okay, so one of the appeals for me, at least, and I'll touch upon this in a later video on the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, but it is the ability to really play a lot of disruption. Typical ad nauseum tendrils, the Epic Storm type combo decks, spell-based combo decks, storm decks traditionally, will play something along the lines of, I don't know, I would say between 6 and 8 disruption cards. And I don't think that's bad for them. I think that's also because a lot of their combo is a little bit more resilient because it has like Galvanic Relay has Storm, Tendrils of Agony has Storm, Past in Flames has Flashback, Empty the Warrens has Storm. These are like cards with built-in protection. Doomsday doesn't have like can't be flashbacked. It doesn't have Storm. Doomsday with Storm, that would be kind of crazy. Um, but so we need and are happy to play a lot of disruption. I think 11 cards in this slot here is pretty good. I'm really a big fan of playing days. I know some people will cut the number of days. I think that's also fine. You could play 2 or 3. I personally like 4 if I can get away with it, but could also go down to 3 pretty easily. Some number of discard spells, usually between 2 and 4. And then Force of Will, which I think is a pretty big draw for playing this deck. It's a Dark Ritual combo deck that also gets to play Force of Will. So that means, like traditionally, I feel like I did play a lot of Ad Nauseam Tendrils in the past, and I feel like traditionally those types of decks will struggle versus other fast combo decks. Especially faster combo decks, and especially combo decks that has like are both fast and has Force of Will. So like back in the day, the Reanimator deck of choice was a Dimir Reanimator, and it played Force of Will in Days and Thoughtseize, and it was a nightmare to face with Storm. And another thing that Storm decks traditionally struggle a little bit with is like prison pieces. So if your opponent ever can resolve like a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or a Chalice of the Void, or something like that, you usually have a bad time as a Storm player. The same is true for Doomsday, but we have Force of Will to protect, which is obviously not always going to be enough, but it does mean that when people play like Stompy decks, when they go just spew their whole hand out on their turn one, you have access to Force of Will, and that's a pretty big deal. Okay, I think I'm actually going to switch the order of these, and I'm going to talk about the utility cards last. So the mana ramp here is certainly important for this version of Doomsday. You could choose to play a slower version and cut on some of these, and also the numbers aside from the 4 dark rituals I don't think are set in stone. But you do want fast mana because ideally you want to be casting Doomsday on the early turns. Uh, we'll get back in later episodes to discuss like play patterns and whether or not like resolving turn 1 Doomsday is always where you want to be at, but you do want them on turn like early turns. And these are all like card disadvantage, which trades cards for mana. So you go down on cards in order to perform game actions that usually you need more mana. You need to be further along in the game to achieve. And that's like this deck is like really has a lot of card disadvantage built in, and trades the cards for basically winning the game with Doomsday. And we need these fast mana effects to do that. You always want, I would say, 4 Dark Ritual, pretty much. And I think you at least want 2 Petal, 2 Lotus Petal. And Probably, I mean, I think three is a nice number because Lotus Petal can both be a very important card to put in the Doomsday pile, but it is also, you'll notice we're playing 14 lands, 15 if you count Cavern of Souls. So we don't have that many lands, and sometimes, a Lotus Petal with a Dark Ritual and a Doomsday on turn one, like imagine you said, oh, maybe we don't need 9 mana ramp cards. We cut a Lotus Petal and add like a third Preordain. And if that third Preordain is in your opening hand was a Lotus Petal, and you had Dark Ritual Doomsday and no lands, you can see how that would make a pretty big difference. So I think having no fewer than, I would say, at least two. That's also for pile purposes, and I think three is fine. I think four is also certainly acceptable, probably in the place of one of the Cabal rituals here. And then yeah, we have the lands. I'll definitely be talking a lot about this later on. But this is we this is a deck that is really hungry for Underground Sea. So much so that at times the deck will play a fifth Underground Sea in the form of Watery Grave. Basically, whenever we aren't able to use a ritual or petal to cast Doomsday, we're going to need 3 lands that make black mana. And once we have resolved Doomsday, we really want all of our lands to make blue mana to resolve Thassa's Oracle. So that is why Underground Sea is such an important part of the deck, and that's also why the deck is pretty soft to stuff that messes with our lands, like Blood Moon and Wastelands. But I'll be touching on that in the strengths and weaknesses video that is going to be coming up. Um, you'll see here I have a basic island. That could be the Watery Grave. If you're splashing a third color, that could also be like the Splash Duel. And you can obviously also tinker with the numbers here, play 15 or say even 16 non-Cavern of Souls lands. Okay, finally, I want to touch on the utility cards. So, one you'll notice is obviously Thassa's Oracle. We need that. We also need one Lion's Eye Diamond. I have played a list without any Lion's Eye Diamond, and while I do also often board it out, this is, I think, an essential card. This card enables the fastest winning lines. It usually involves, like, obviously discarding your hand. So it usually means you can't. By the time Thassa's Oracle goes onto the stack, you usually won't have any Force of Will in your hand or days or whatever. So this is more like a once you are sure the battle is won. Uh, Usually the battle will be for the Doomsday resolving. Then use Lines Out Diamond to just win on the spot there. And it's also very, very good versus non-blue matchups where you don't necessarily want to be giving your opponent more turns to draw Wastelands or to draw Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or whatever. So you want to win on the same turn. And I'll be getting into the basic heuristics of how to win, how to construct at least one very, very the quintessential sort of Lines that I'm in brainstorm pile. Okay, so the other very important utility cards are the cyclers. I have 4 in this list. I would like to play somewhere between 3 and 5. I think you can go up to 6. That's really aggressive because the problem with the cyclers is like on their own they're not that good. Like you don't want to be drawing multiple Edge of Autumns unless you're also just you have your Doomsday and are ready to use them. Um, Basically, what's so sweet about the cyclers is they aren't when you cycle them they're not spells, which means you can quote unquote like draw cards. I guess it's not in quotations. You are drawing cards without putting spells on the stack. So you can completely ignore stuff like Trinisphere, uh, Chalice, whatever, with a cycler. Um, it's funny. One card that I think a lot of the Doomsday community really misses, and that is considered one of the great cards. And if we ever had that unbanned in Legacy again, it would just wreak havoc. Is Gitaxian Probe, and while I don't disagree, and I would love Gitaxian Probe, and I would instantly include it in Doomsday, and I would be building with that card in mind. Gitaxian Probe is a spell, and it's a blue spell, so it eats a Pyroblast so fast. So it is like these in that way. These two different cards have a clear advantage. You need them a lot of the time when building piles. They can be proxies for cards that you need to go off once you've resolved Doomsday, because you get to draw the top card. You can versus combo decks. You can like make a Doomsday pile and then put a Force of Will on top and cycle into it if you need to pass the turn anyways. So the cyclers are great. They each have downsides. Losing a land versus the 2 life, different situations, different opponents, different matchups will require or push you towards one of these more than the other, and it's important to have access to both. Then we have deep analysis and ideas unbound. I'm just going to talk, and I guess I'll talk about all three. You need at least one of consider or deep analysis to have access to the traditional, most frequently used like line that wins on the same turn. Um, if you if you have deep analysis, you also need consider, but not ideas unbound. So I guess if I move these around, so the deep analysis kind of goes with the consider, but the consider can act without deep analysis. Um, and I think like deep analysis requires you to go through the graveyard. So if your opponent just is sitting on an open, an untapped Elvish Reclaimer and 2 open mana, for instance, or you suspect they have crop rotation for Brajuka Bog, then this is a pretty glaring weakness. Aside from this card, the deck has no graveyard dependencies. So I would say that I personally have gone away from playing this card currently, but it also does have some advantages. Like if you play a list with a deep analysis and multiple considers, that increases the chance that you'll have a consider in your hand when Doomsday is resolving, and then you just need a blue mana. You put deep analysis on top, LED beneath it, and then the pile sort of it almost builds itself, and that is sort of a very low resource. A low resource count. But I'll get back to that when talking about the most common piles. And then we have, finally, Cavern of Souls. This is, I think, one of the essential cards in the deck. This is the card that just completely dumpsters on a lot of the ways that control decks will fight you. And like with between 4 Dazes, 4 Force of Will, a lot of the really satisfying ways that this deck wins is just brute forcing through an early Doomsday. And if you're up against a control deck, it's not like if they don't know what you're playing, and let's say they're on the play, they go turn 1 Ponder, and in your hand is a Daze, a Force, a blue card, a Dark Ritual, a Doomsday, and a land. Like they would need 2 like hard counters in their hand. And a lot of times they won't have that. And you just spew your entire hand, and Doomsday resolves, and now you build a pile that finishes with Cavern of Souls and Thassa's Oracle, and that is just incredibly hard to beat. I think if Cavern of Souls hadn't been printed, that would meaningfully decrease the power level of this deck, in my opinion. So you don't want to leave home without it. Sometimes people will start with this in the sideboard, just because they like. What this also is very, very important in beating is Pyroblasts out of the sideboard, because like every red deck is going to have like some number of Pyroblasts against you after board, and that is just such a low resource counterspell and low cost counterspell that if you don't have Cavern, it's going to be pretty hard after you resolve Doomsday if they have like say a Force of Will and a Pyroblast. Now you need to do a lot of work like after Doomsday is done resolving. Okay, So I think that is it for the structure of the deck. I know this got maybe a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, and I hope it wasn't too boring. I hope you enjoyed this. I will be back with the next in this series very soon, where I will be looking at the play patterns, the heuristics of playing the deck, and then I'll see if I can also fit in the talk about strengths and weaknesses, or if that is going to be for a subsequent video. All right, well, thanks a lot for watching. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm happy to have you here, and I'll be back with some more Legacy. Bye bye.